When most people join a group, they think that's the end of the quest. They think they'll be there forever. But the reality is, they will either change or the group itself will die. And there is often a need for groups to die, and most people are not aware of how important this death process really is. Some groups come with a clear sell-by date. There is a set of ritual work that they need to accomplish by a certain time on a certain date. For example, a group that was doing magic to prevent the Cold War turning into a nuclear war will have long since abandoned that particular practice, although they might be wanting to dust off their rituals now. But it's incredibly important for a person within a group to see whether or not the writing is on the wall and that it is about to explode or die. One of the most annoying facts about groups is they often don't even recognize that they're about to die themselves. They will often close, refuse to meet for years without anybody saying this group is formally dead. The Bristol Temple of the Golden Dawn, for example, had its last meeting in the 1960s, but didn't actually end until the 1970s when the last member died. The Druidic Order of Pendragon had its last meeting in the 1940s, but managed to continue going on until the 1970s without holding a meeting. This isn't particularly desirable because the group is not functioning properly and nobody is really aware of what's going on or getting access to the material. Fori Ra is another example of a group that continued well past its sell-by date. It formally closed at the end of the 1970s, but hadn't really had an effective system of training or large numbers of people for at least 10, 15 years before that. Part of the problem of groups that are dying is that they are failing to produce adequate teaching or ritual experiences. The leadership is unable to make a connection with the divine spirit behind the order that initially founded it. A group which has a lineage back to the Victorian period is fine, but the Victorian period is not the modern 21st century. It cannot speak to modern magicians. Something has changed. And either the group adapts, which is quite difficult to do because it requires it to overcome its own egregore, or it dies naturally. One of the most obvious signs that a group is dying is when no one shows up anymore, and that covers about a year of no new members, no new initiations, or any grade advancements, because there's probably not enough officers to do the job. As I mentioned before, the other sign that a group is dying is that the teaching is too old for the younger members to understand. It's either written in a way that its language is out of date and no one over the age of 60 can understand it. It was said that the Holy Grail changes its form. Modern Wicca is not the same as ancient witchcraft. There is no way that any of these systems would be able to operate in their true original ancient form with modern people. Another sign that a group is dying is that there's no new teaching being generated. Now, this is quite difficult to tell because you have, in some groups, large volumes of curriculum that you have to work through. But if there is nothing new being generated, then you know that there is no contact, no inspiration to the group's teachers. This is quite important. For example, builders of the Adytum hasn't really had any new teachings since Anne Davies died in the 1960s. So this means, and the reason they thought this was because they thought, well, Anne Davies was the last teacher we needed. But the reality is things have moved on considerably since the 1960s. And that lack of teaching becomes a straitjacket for future generations. Another sign that a group is dying is when the current leadership cannot follow in the founder's footsteps. Now, this is not just creating new teaching. This covers everything from basic leadership skills to being able to pull through the ritual power for an initiation. Sometimes you find groups have what is called drawbridge syndrome, which is where they take the higher teachings and move it so far up the grade structure that nobody ever sees it. And the reason they do this is because the current leaders don't understand it, and they don't want people who might understand it knowing that they don't. So they remove it up to a higher grade so they don't have to talk about it. This was quite common in the Golden Dawn, or particularly the later phase of the Golden Dawn. Another sign that things aren't going well is when people leave before they are completely trained. Now, I don't mean normal low-grade people who just appear because they want to see what the group's like and lose interest, or face an initiatic challenge and can't actually handle it and move on. I'm meaning large-scale groups of people who have been dedicated to the group for a while, and they just leave because they don't get what they want. Now, sometimes this happens that they have a row with the leadership, and that's quite funny when it happens, because that is the universe's way of saying, get the hell out of Dodge really fast, because things are about to go pear-shaped, which is what is happening. Another sign, although quite rare, that a group is about to die is when the leadership gets involved with a scheme, an embezzlement, or some criminal activity which somehow involves the group. They might also be involved in sexual scandals with their own members. This usually starts on day one, so it's not something that happens later on in the scheme. But what happens towards the end of a group is, if the leader always did that, then suddenly everything's revealed and people have to leave. There is another difficult sign which most people won't recognize, but if you're doing a ritual and the atmosphere in the room is dead, the candidates stop reporting spectacular feelings, or feeling sick usually, during their initiations. All these things point to some drop in power. And what this represents is that the group has started to lose its contact. It's a mistake to believe that it's the Hierophant or the officers that initiate the candidates. They're merely conduits through which other forces are initiating. So if those initiating forces aren't there, then nothing's happening. And a lot of groups aren't aware of this, and so they don't notice that there's an echo in the room when they do an initiation. And this is a sign that things are coming to a head fast. Around the same time, you'll find leaders giving themselves ridiculous titles. I usually think it's a sign that a group neither has any power at all, never had any power at all, or is just simply on its way out, is when the leader starts calling themselves by ridiculously long Latin titles to indicate how important they are. This isn't a sign of ego. It's more to do with they're trying to cover up the fact that there is nothing there, and if they think people like long titles, they'll fall for it, and it's not necessarily a good thing to happen. Now, a strange thing can happen when a group, a smaller group, which is part of a bigger group, decides to schism off. This is because usually the leaders have some degree of enthusiasm and see that the wider umbrella group is bogged down in bureaucracy or has its own problems, so they want to pull away. Now, the central danger behind this is that they don't have any of the egregore, they don't have any of the main powers. So the mere fact that they want to schism off is a sign that the whole system is corrupt and folding. If they wanted to form another group with a similar sort of strain, they should have to pull out of the group, the wider group entirely, so that they can build something new that isn't connected to the original organization. Few people want to do this. So you find, for example, if somebody wants to schism off their own Golden Dawn group and form an order, they are too connected to the original order, and they'll eventually fold. What many people don't realize is that it's perfectly normal for a group to die. The forces behind orders will cheerfully go and find another vessel or another means to manifest what they want to do. They don't need an old order. So this whole idea of taking a group and resurrecting it is fraught with problems. If you started a Golden Dawn group, taking the original rituals and being really emphatic about the fact that you are going to stick to the original rituals, you are going to generate the same problems that the original Golden Dawn had. You are going to inflate the same egos in the same way, and you will be significantly out of touch with the magical world around you. It's not a good idea to try and do that. It's much, much better to, if you're a teacher, to assemble a group based on what you want to say, what you want to do, rather than just to go excavating and trying to reanimate a zombie. I'm not saying you ditch these old orders entirely. You don't take, if you want to start a Golden Dawn-esque group, you would take some of the Golden Dawn rituals, you would rewrite them so they spoke in a modern language to modern people, and you would do it in a slightly less Masonic or Edwardian sort of way. You will get a different result than someone who is trying to do a reenactment. Like I said, it is better to let the damn thing die.